Hey guys, so for this video, we're going to be looking at how to create a pencil shader brush in Adobe Photoshop. The first thing I'm going to do is use the brush tool to create a random shape. This is going to be the brush tip shape for our brand new pencil brush. Then I'm going to select that shape by hitting Control on my keyboard and then clicking on the layer icon. That's going to give us the marching ants around the shape, and then I'm going to go into Filter, Render, and Clouds. That's going to give us a random texture inside the shape. Then I'm going to hit Control D to deselect. And then I'm going to hit Control J to duplicate that layer. Then I'm going to hit Control T so I can resize and flip this particular pattern around, just to make it a little bit more random. And then I'm going to set the blending mode to multiply, and then reduce the opacity down a little bit, just so that it's not too dark. Then I'm going to hit Control J again to create a duplicate of that layer, and then I'm going to hit Control T so that we can transform it one more time. Now for this last step, I'm actually using a soft round brush to add a little bit of darkness toward the center of the brush. And I'm doing this so that the brush will actually paint a little bit more uniformly. You don't actually have to do this step if you don't want to. It really depends on how you want the brush to look at the end. Then you can just use the Marquee tool to select the area with your brush tip, then go to Edit and then choose Define Brush Preset. It'll give you the option to name your brush, then hit OK, and then I'm going to hide the previous layers and create a new layer. So this is what the brush currently looks like, and clearly this is not what we want, so we're going to be going into the brush settings and making some adjustments. So the first thing I'm going to do is turn on Shape Dynamics. I'm going to set the size jitter to pen pressure, and then I'm going to raise the minimum diameter. Then I'm going to go into Transfer. I'm going to make sure that opacity jitter is set to pin pressure and flow jitter is also set to pin pressure. And that's going to give us a brush that's a little bit easier to blend with. Additionally, I'm going to make sure that smoothing, buildup, and noise are also enabled. And now I'm going to apply texture to this. For the pattern, I'm actually using a custom paper texture. If you're interested in how I create that, I have a separate tutorial explaining that process. I'm going to set the mode for this texture to subtract, and I'm going to make sure that texture each tip is enabled. And then I'm just going to see how this brush handles as I adjust the sliders. Overall, the brush is actually creating some really interesting results. But getting that right balance is a little bit tricky because I don't want the brush to draw too dark, and I also don't want it to draw too soft. Basically, I want to be able to draw a very, very light line and then build up that brush as I draw on top. So this is what I have for the brush so far. It's a very soft pencil shader. It does pretty good with the hatch marks, and then it also builds up very nicely, so I can get a full range of values the more that I draw on top of this. Now I have another pencil shader brush that I did outside of this tutorial, and that one has a few hatch marks in the middle of the shading. If you want these hatch marks in your shader brush, then all you have to do is skip that last step when creating the brush tip, so you don't have to use a soft round to fill in the center of the brush. And that's going to leave a lot more texture for the pencil tip and actually create a more uneven surface. Now the results will vary quite a bit, so you might either get splotchiness or a little bit of a hatch mark, so it might require a little bit of trial and error. Once you're happy with your brush, just click on the Add icon in the bottom right corner of the brush settings. That will give you the option to name your brush. And I usually deselect the capture brush size and preset for any shader brushes, but you can leave this enabled if you prefer. Hit OK and that will save it to your library. Now if you're curious about how I use my pencil brushes, here's a quick time lapse. Normally when I'm working traditionally, I actually use the broad side of my pencil to get a very soft, wide mark, and I actually lay out my entire sketch doing that. So when I'm working traditionally, I do the exact same thing. I just do a quick sketch with the pencil brush that I showed you how to make in this tutorial, and then I use a pencil with a harder tip to refine the sketch and put in all the details. Now unfortunately, I did not plan to do this sketch, so I didn't catch myself at the beginning of the sketch. I only caught myself towards the last third of the drawing process. But essentially you can see how I'm building up the more refined lines on top of the softer lines, and then sometimes I erase out the shading and then redo the shading if it doesn't look right. But that's how I actually use the brushes in combination. Occasionally I will also use this shader brush as a kneaded eraser. So if you've ever worked traditionally, then you know that a kneaded eraser is very, very soft, it's very pliable, and it very gently lifts the graphite off the paper. So if you don't want to have a very hard edge when you erase, then you would use a kneaded eraser. So this brush actually doubles not only as a shader brush, but also as a brush that kind of gives that same look and feel as a kneaded eraser. Now if you're interested in knowing how I created the textures for my brushes, you can check out my video about creating paper texture patterns in Photoshop. Until next time, I'll see you later.